You're listening to the People Agenda podcast, brought to you by leading HR, workforce and payroll transformation specialist, Lace Partners.
Good morning, good afternoon and good evening, and welcome to the latest People Agenda podcast. It's me, Chris Howard from Lace Partners, and I thank you once again for listening in. I do a nice huge microphone boom plonked right in front of my face, and today we're doing that with a guest from an organisation called HiBob. We'll introduce him in a second, but before he speaks his wisdom and his truths to us, I need my co-host to also say, although you might have already heard her in the background, to say hello. Debbie, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. It's lovely to be here.
It's always lovely to be here.
Always lovely to be here.
We are going to talk about the What is a CPO series, but let's get our guest to introduce themselves first. It's Toby Hough, who is the VP of People and Culture. Did I get that right?
Toby Hough.
Hough, sorry.
That's okay. I have once been called Toby Hough from HiBob.
I got one of them right. That's fine.
Exactly.
Toby, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and also HiBob and your background as well?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, I'm Toby Hough. I'm VP of People and Culture for the Europe region at HiBob. HiBob is an HR and finance platform providing full suite of integrated solution for HR teams and more into the finance space as well. I've been with the organization for 4.5 years and watched us grow from serving the sort of SMB businesses right up now to companies of several thousand employees with a big global spread. But that's really our sweet spot. So anything from 50 employees to 12,000 now. And it is a pretty magical place to work in the HR space. We live and breathe HR. My colleagues on the sales, product development and everything in between, this is what they do. It's think about the world that we also really care about. So it's quite a privileged environment in which to work. And also quite a challenging one because our customers are fantastic and innovative and our team are informed, and we are a growth scale up like any other, meaning we have the same kind of constraints. So that question of my customers doing this, why aren't we, from an HR practice point of view, is one that we have to shield. I haven't always worked in HR. I started my career in management consulting and then eventually had a little bit of a move from software implementation into sort of half and half business partnering and implementation through to jumped in with both feet, and I haven't looked back.
Excellent. Thank you. Interesting kind of background. I'm sure we'll explore that a little bit more. I think on the What is a CPO podcast, we're really exploring senior leadership roles in the HR function and how they differ or are similar in lots of cases, depending on whether we're talking about big, small, geographically spread or niche, unconnected or connected workforces. So we're really looking at all the different elements of the sort of senior leadership roles within HR. So I'm going to ask you a question about what is a CPO?
So it's a big question in 3 words or 4 words. I would say it is the spinal cord of an organization. And I don't think that was the case universally pre-COVID. Post-COVID, a lot of organizations that weren't there before have now caught up to that view. And I think in the AI world we're in now, that's being further proved to be the case. And without a CPO at the heart of your C-suite who is able to challenge leaders across all disciplines, slow down when things need to be slowed down in order to speed up in the right way, look round the corners, and bring that translator role from experience and impact of an individual employee up to the stresses and requirements that the CEO is under from the board or from investors. You can't exist in that spinal cord place, but that nerve system spinal cord is how I would view it.
And it's really interesting. Some of the things you describe in there are interesting things. So again, if we bring that to any sort of senior regional geographical business unit, HR leader, SVP in your case, it's an interesting question around how do you plan for the future? How do you look around the corners? So often what we're faced with is such busy day job that finding the time to stop and breathe and think about what's coming. How do we prep for it? How's it going to impact our business? How can we stay ahead of the competition in that field? That can be challenges. How are you able to make space for that?
Do you know, this has been something I'm much better at, but also trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And when I first joined HiBob in this role, I was not so good at it. And actually, our chief customer officer, who is one of my key clients, partners, and also gives very good words of wisdom, said to me at one point, you need to sort your diary out. Otherwise, you'll never find any thinking time. So actually, just diary discipline. Sometimes I think the space to be strategic starts with an operational decision. I'm being uniform about who I meet and when and on what cadence to free up more space. I'm getting rid of that regular one-to-one, and I'll say, I'm available reactively if you need me, but let's not block out the time, was the first needle mover. The second one was the team I built around me. That's been the biggest game changer. The first one is marginal gains. And then I had one person on the team when I joined. Now there are 9. We look after 450 employees across 5 different countries. And with those 9 individuals, I have the space to breathe because I trust them and they are skilled and able to do what is needed. And then I think the final piece is not expecting every day to be equal and giving yourself the space for that to be okay. Yeah. There are some days when you walk in and you realize that it's a have you got a minute day, and for everybody.
For everybody, yeah.
And 450 minutes doesn't fit into a day, so that means that you are just not going to get it done. But being disciplined about carving out the time.
Yeah. And so when you have those instances, and because no 2 days are different, how do you therefore judge and measure your own success or the success of your team, given that you've got such fluid kind of almost daily objectives or monthly, weekly objectives? What does success mean to you and your team?
Yeah, I think we have built some really important rhythms, and we're actually enhancing those as well. I mentioned when I joined, my team was very small. The organization that I supported was 60 people across 2 countries. So we could get away with it then without thinking too much about, and we could be a little bit more reactive. I knew at that point we were in a hypergrowth phase. And so the work is self-evident in hypergrowth. There's so much to do, and the impact is really visible in front of you. We are doubling the team this year. We're opening a new site. We're supporting an acquisition. That's the work. And it intrinsically has a strategic element related to it. Now that we are larger and there's several plates that have to spin at the same time, that's when it gets more interesting. And last year we had a strategic plan that my team built, and it was way too big. So we fell into that trap. It was, I think, about 35, 40 lines long. And so that kind of strategic zoom out, zoom in at the end of a quarter and into the next didn't really add very much value. It was just overwhelming. This year, for the whole year, across the whole team, it's 15 lines long. And we've just this week done each person presents. I managed to move the needle on these 3 or 4 things last quarter, and this is what I'm going to move the needle on next. And we talk intentionally about how we have to have that moment to remind ourselves as well that despite the reactive nature of the work, we are still making progress on things that we know to be important for the overall direction.
Yeah. I think we see it a lot, the work we do around planning, prioritisation, supporting teams in programme office or chiefs of staff. And I think what we see a lot is that kind of, there's a few big headings and then the list of programmes underneath or projects underneath, or activities that are classed as projects becomes far too big and it's unwieldy. And where do you start and how do you prioritise? And I think the less is more is a really interesting kind of approach to it, right? Which is, and also your point around, are we moving the needle, yes or no? And if we're not, what do we do about that?
What do we do about it? The other thing we've learned, and our global chief people officer is a great role model for this, is there is always too much to do. One of the traps I think HR can fall into, and this is where we stop being really strategically aligned with the business, is we bring our experience and our intent and we see all these great things that we could build that we feel could have an impact. But we're not always scrutinizing whether or not that thing that we've done in the past is what our current organization needs, or whether the current iteration of our organization needs it. It gets double click on it. And we have to force ourselves to think about what we can live with that's imperfect right now. That's the reference I made earlier with one of the challenges of working in HR, in an HR organization, is that our team also are interested in the HR space. Yeah. So they will come and say, I've got a client doing this really fantastic thing. I wish we could do this thing. Yeah. And it's explaining to them that we have the same constraints as our clients do as well. Yeah. And the business does as well. If you oversaturate the business with HR initiatives because you're excited about it and you want to show that you're doing loads of stuff, then none of them stick.
Yeah. So let's just dive into that strategic planning piece for a moment, because I think that's interesting. I think, again, we would see some of the best CPOs are so closely aligned to the business strategy. In fact, lots of them say, I don't want a people strategy, I only want the business strategy. So I'd be interested in your views on that. But that really strong alignment that says it's not HR for HR's sake. It's not because we heard a buzzword in a magazine somewhere, we're now going to apply that and create a whole initiative out of it with mouse mats and T-shirts. And I'm probably going back a bit far. Do we still do that? Yeah, cupcakes. It's actually now about what is really going to drive commercial value or efficiency. We see the balance. Sometimes it's about commercial value, business growth, achieving ambition, or it's about let's get more efficiency. So where are you on that kind of spectrum? What's the journey like in terms of, sound a bit X Factor, but what's the journey like in terms of sort of as your organisation grows, how your strategy has to evolve?
When I started out, it was so much to do in front of us. So both at a regional strategy that I lead and the global HR strategy that I feed in sections of as a member of the global leadership team, that intentional in early day, because we weren't so rigid as an organisation. We a bit more of an instinctive approach to it. And I think it works for those moments. You know, if you're doubling or tripling in size in a year, if your revenue targets are kind of 40-50% year-on-year growth, and there are new markets that you're expanding to, new products that you're launching, new segments that you're pushing into, you can kind of have a little bit of a go at everything.
Yeah.
You know, that you're not in the low-hanging, so you are in the low-hanging fruit stage. It's all there. And yeah, you know, that at the time it feels challenging, but it doesn't require that. Let's really have these intentional conversations across the board, because if you're just paying attention to what's going on around you, there's stuff to do.
Yeah, and lots of things will have a bit of an impact.
Lots of things will have a bit of an impact. Where we are now, so 1,400 employees, and at a point where none of those low-hanging fruit, easy opportunities remain. We're really in the optimize phase, and we're in that great contradiction where we need both. We need the same 35-40% year-on-year growth, but we also now need efficiency. And I think I hear that a lot in the customers of ours that I speak to as well. It used to be either or, and more it's becoming both. So then the problem isn't so obvious. And there is that question of, are we going to be spending our time as an HR function on things that are going to help hit the sweet spot in terms of that efficient, good cholesterol growth? And for that, we have a couple of approaches that have worked really nicely this year. We deliberately delayed our own planning cycle as an HR function. So we let the business run theirs. We played a role in it through the business partnering network. We challenged them as well. But when it came to us going as an HR leadership team for an offsite, we came armed with the key goals that the business had for the following year, and where we felt that they had potential roadblocks and enablers that had a people lens to it. So that then led to a really fantastic kind of client group-led conversation of, hey, I support the EMEA sales. It's about 80% of the company's number it was at the time. These are the challenges that are going to get in the way of them actually being able to deliver that I think we have to develop programs that will help them unlock. And then we repeated that at a regional level. So all of the VPs across the EMEA region, when I ran my teams offsite at the end of last year, I had the VPs come and present their 2026 plans. And then I said to them, we will now be working together as a team for the next 3 or 4 days. And in a couple of weeks, we will come back and present to you our HR program that we believe will help move the needle on the key items that you've shared. And we now give them those same updates. And it creates that ongoing conversation with the business, and it gives you that confidence. I think when you've then embedded yourself in the organization that way, you permit yourselves to give suggestions to the business about of things they might not have thought about. So it's not just taking instruction.
Yeah.
And then there is that bit, which is by the way, we just have to do this as well. You might not like it, but it's on the roadmap. And this year, there's tons of that. We've got pay transparency across Europe, or have we?
At time of recording.
Yeah, at the time of recording, we might have pay transparency in Germany, maybe in June, and the rest unsure. Yeah. We crossed the 250 person threshold at the end of the last tax year, so we've just been through our first gender pay gap report. And so there are certain things where it's a non-negotiable.
Yeah,
we just have to do it.
And we have a fairly well-known piece of writing now around the 4 hats of the CPO, right? So one of those hats is compliance. When we do workshops and we give out sparkly coloured hats to reflect the different hats of the CPO, no one picks the compliance one as their favourite, but it's the point of it, right? It's a mandatory element. But there's also the transformation lead or the experience lead. And those are the different kind of elements to the role, there's always going to be those critical kind of qualifiers or the baseline framework that you've got to apply to meet the legislative requirements or sometimes just the moral requirements. But then there's those other exciting things that you could get into that really, like you say, push the needle on the business. I think the other one that's interesting when we talk about the hats, we talk about 4 hats, and we got some pushback from some of our CPO colleagues who said, where's the conscience of the organisation? And we described that now, because we didn't want to have 5 hats, as the head that wears the hats. So when you talked about pushing back to some of your senior leaders, that's some of the element of you're the critical friend, you're the conscience. They may not want to do pay transparency, but they may have to. They may need that kind of sounding board. And that's, again, where we see the senior role sit in. So there's the compliance part, yes. There's we're going to help you drive bottom line results or growth or whatever it is, efficiency. But also we're going to challenge and we're going to push back when we need to. We're going to be the critical friend when we need to. We're going to represent the employee voice at the leadership table.
Yes, and I think being able to help those business leaders understand the multiplier effect of losing the direction around that. One of the avenues that got me into HR in the first place was a particular company's approach that I worked for around organizational culture, and they did such a fantastic job of demystifying it and linking business outcomes to strong culture. And I've come to realize that it's not a one and done. It's like a very sensitive organism to keep alive. We should never talk about preserving culture. I think this is understood now. It's really about intentional evolution. But if you take your eye off it, it will go off in a direction that isn't necessarily the one you want it to be in. And a really basic example, but I think it's so relevant to the pressures that our leaders are under is where performance meets culture, and how to own performance at scale in a way that feels like it really enhances your culture. But it's the first thing will get thrown back in your face by employees if a difficult conversation is had and they didn't like the way it was conducted, and they'll say, I really don't, I think we're off now. I thought the culture here was X and now I think it's Y. And sometimes we need to course correct with employees. It can be an easy thing to throw back at the business. But I also feel, especially in an international environment, we do have to step in and defend that sometimes. Yeah, where the business might say to us, I've got these underperformers, they just need to go. It's a new year next year. I can't carry that number fully ramped into H1, and let's make the decision. And you say to them, I understand where those pressures are coming from. I've been in the meetings where the CEO is giving those pressures in words to those business leaders. But on the flip side, we know that then starts to cause a rot that sinks in and a lack of a trust in the organization. And consistency matters. So if we suddenly go in and say, you know what, we're scrapping all of those normal performance intervention stages that we do because it's December and we don't want you in January, people aren't idiots. They pick up on that. They say, okay, this is what you really value, is it? So I love those kind of polarity because that's the reality of what we do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting hearing you speak about, and we spoke about this just before we actually went live, talking about how, like, I think about marketing and I talk to my team about you have internal customers, and HR has a very much internal mindset like that. And it's almost flipped the other way because you're also, yes, you have internal customers, but you are also the internal customer. You've talked about rapid rate of growth and how things are changing. You just talked there about culture. So I'm interested to find out how much your job has changed as somebody who's a senior HR leader, and how you've found, or what some of the learnings you've taken from being able to adapt and change from an organization where X number of 100 people to, what was it, 1,400 or so that you're at now?
Yeah, I think I intentionally put myself in this kind of organization where there would be rapid growth, because I've always loved that need to zoom out. In the early days, I did this with my team at the end of each year, where we would say to ourselves, looking back, what was needed of us as an organization last year, and do we think that's going to be the case going into next? I think this also links to intentional performance culture, and it's something that we've worked with the business on since then. So there was a year where we looked back, it had been a year where it was all about growing headcount. And so we said to ourselves, let's take a deep breath and let's go. It's going to be imperfect and a bit messy, but it's the sticking plaster and everything we can do in order to get this really ambitious headcount growth. And then we knew going into the year after that we were going to be nowhere near the same headcount growth. And I could almost feel the team in their roles panting on the spot going, what do we do now? We've done. Where's the next challenge? And we said to each other, wow, okay, now it's slow down, it's optimize, it's go deep, it's critique and rip apart those processes that we built in order to get by that hypergrowth, and it's finding enjoyment in improving and optimizing. And you do that in a couple of ways. Sometimes you'll have people on your team that are great at making those gear changes. And sometimes you need to zoom out and look at the overall capability of your team and say, okay, I'm bringing in somebody now who is slow and meticulous and detailed versus the kind of sprinters that I brought in so far.
I think it's really interesting to me, that idea that you've got to go fast. So you'll just, I'm going to make this sound negative, I don't mean to, but you'll just throw in a process to get you through that. But actually, that's not the end of the story. That then there is it's got to be fit for purpose. I'm not suggesting it wasn't, but then there's a kind of reflection point of, okay, let's go deep. Let's figure out how to make it really optimal and deliver what we need for the next stage of recruitment. Isn't volume, it might be quality, or it might be niche skills, or that it's an interesting kind of dynamic.
That's the kind of big headcount growth to slowing down situation. We are at 1,400 now. We're not expecting to be doubling that at this point. We just wouldn't. It would be a dreadful business model. I love the phase we're at now because it comes back to our earlier discussion. It really requires being in lockstep with the business, understanding their metrics. If a quarter is missed, why? And being involved in those conversations. If a quarter is exceeded, why? Replicate that. How do we bottle it up? And taking the time to zoom out and think, you know what, I'm hearing a consistent theme of conversation in this part of the business and that part of the business, and we've got something here we need to deal with. There've been a couple of moments in the last couple of years where I've really found that fulfilling. One was around the whole organization's relationship with change, and we went on a whole campaign about ditching the concept of change management in its pure as no longer being fit for purpose, and instead needing to build a culture that is based in grounding a change mindset. It's semantics. The next phase was then redefining what performance looks like as the organization, because we had that example I was giving you about us as an HR team was true across the entire organization. When you're a fast growth scale up, you attract people that get an adrenaline buzz from see a problem, solve a problem, be a Jack or a Jackie of all trades, get SHIT done. Not sure if I was allowed to say that on the podcast.
There you are.
Okay, great. Get shit done. But then, and this was fast forwarded by AI, you then get to a point of, and in order to meet growth plus efficiency, we need repeatable processes. We need teams to be functioning in broadly the same way. We need to be documenting and packaging up so that it can be replicated. And people who had been told consistently for 2 or 3 years that they were a top performer because they were scrappy and independent,
got on with it,
were becoming barriers, scaling the new kind of performance that we needed. And when we zoomed out and looked at that, I thought, this is fascinating, just as a kind of next stage to get to. And the teams that were able to successfully take their own people through that were the ones that took the time to explain it, to chart the course, and have the frank conversations about whether this was therefore the place that certain team members wanted to be. This is about will rather than skill. And some of them saying, no, I'm an early organization person, and this whole, I can't implement anything until I've coordinated with 3 other people and we've all built the same process and rolled it out together and then fed it into an automated GPT. This ain't for me. I'm off. And we're still in elements of that phase now.
So should we talk about the AI?
Yeah, that I'm really interested in, because as we talked about, I can't remember now if this was before, because we had a really good chat before we actually hit the record button. I can't remember if we talked about this. I'm fascinated to see, because you're a tech company, you work for a tech company. I really find it fascinating, the whole, as I said, the whole internal customer type thing, because you're almost on the front line as well as delivering. Is there any kind of approaches or things that you guys have done differently from a HR or a people function in the AI space that listeners to this, because there will be CPOs that work in manufacturing companies or that work in white-collar organizations, large white-collar organizations, that are probably thinking, I don't exactly know where I am on the journey. And so one of the benefits of this podcast is to speak to different people like yourself who are in different types of businesses, different types of mindsets, different types of growth, large scale, whatever it is. So is there any kind of bits of advice or things that you guys are doing within your function from an AI perspective you think might be worth people knowing a little bit about?
I think we are all learning this.
Yes.
So I'm going to share it as things that are landing really well, that I think are enablers for us. but I certainly wouldn't present it as the answer. And I'll listen to other episodes of this podcast to hear what others give.
And that's the point, right?
That's the point. And I do think there's something magical about the AI journey that we're all on, in that I can't recall a time where certainly in the white collar space, there's been such a kind of democratization of the need to learn. I'll give you one little example and then explain what it was part of. But one of my real high points of our AI approach at HiBob was at one of our AI days. So everybody hit pause and come in for shared learning experience with some inspiration from external speakers, some really good leadership role modeling from our CEO about his adoption of AI, and then some kind of group learning sessions.
I love this.
We were building a digital twin. So our CEO is a big fan of his digital twin. Yeah. And I honestly was somebody who kept hearing this term and thinking, I don't know what this is. And
I don't want a twin.
My partner and my family and my friends would tell you it was a horrible idea. Like, no one would ever word in edge. And so then I understood a bit more about what a digital twin was. And we had this enablement session that was set up. We were all sat around these tables in our learning area in the office. And the tables were made up of people from all different functions and all different levels of the business. So you had SVPs and our entry-level support team sat around a table, and it was a level playing field. We were all learning together how to build a digital twin and hitting the same kind of roadblocks and looking over to someone else's screen and saying, what did you do there? How did you do that? Hang on, I'm behind a step. Wait for me. And I stopped and looked at this and thought, this is magical, because the connections it's forming is very cool. But look, I think, so the first thing I would say is we're trying to really make this a company-wide journey. We're trying to be nimble and agile with it. So as an HR function, the most impactful work that is being done, and I have to give a shout out to our people growth team here who have partnered with the AI experts that sit in the office of our CIO to be this amazing cross-functional powerhouse that's basically pushing out constant enablement around AI. I guess and I'm saying enablement rather than training, because it doesn't follow the same typical training approach. And at the heart of it is curiosity. Because we are figuring this out, we can't look back at the playbook for how to transform your organization around AI and remove fear and panic and see immediate impact. So we're having to experiment and try and test. So it's a little bit scrappy. It's happening on multiple levels. We have moments like those AI days. We have people that have self-selected as champions who get more kind of white-gloved exposure to how to build custom tools that are relevant for their parts of the business and then see the impact of that. And then we have some of it by level. So as VPs, we're having dedicated time with our CIO team, with our next tech team in the office of the CIO to think about our own workflows and where we need to start finding efficiency and opportunity. We're working with our C-level to workshop what the organization structure of the future could be. So it's scrappy and it's multi-layered. At the heart of it is a concept that came from our people growth team, so from the HR team, which was the access to tools needs to be simple and democratized.
Yes.
So aside from our developers having some unique tools that are relevant to them, it's pretty much that we all have access to the same thing. It's a massive investment. We're spending a lot of money on it, but we don't mind. We think it's necessary. And our CEO believes that we have a moral responsibility to have people leave this organization in a better and in a more fluent AI place than they were when they came in. So those are some of the guiding principles. As an HR function, it is challenging because we spend most of our time doing what I was just talking about, which is thinking about the rest of the organization, which I'm sure will be true for many of the people that sit here on this podcast.
Yeah.
And yet we work as customer zero, and then you said patient zero, but with our products and developer team on the actual development of Bob as a product, as an HR platform. And so one of the things that I'm actually very excited about and gives me confidence in the future of HR tech is that we are totally reliant on the embedded AI solutions that are coming into Bob as a product to really move the needle on our AI adoption and impact as an HR function. So we're doing some of the usual things. We're doing the kind of calendar clear ups, and we've got our I've got my digital twin now. It's not as annoying as I thought it was going to be.
Quite like him.
I quite like him, yeah. Actually very good at writing emails in my voice, which is what he's meant to do, so that's good. We're using Gemini and we're using chat and we're building slides with Notebook LM. And so there's all the sort of day-to-day efficiency gains, which I know we are all struggling to quantify, and that's the problem. But I think there has to be a belief that we are finding those efficiencies. But in terms of that really game-changing cross-functional end-to-end process, or where you've replicated full end-to-end tasks with kind of thought autonomy, we need the product for that. And it's coming, which is very exciting. So because Bob is a fully integrated HR platform, we're not building a random AI wrapper or a standalone AI product. We're embedding an agent into every building block of the product that will then talk to the Bob companion, which sits above. And we're seeing that evolve as it comes out, and that's going to be what really moves the needle for us.
And you're that front line, which is really exciting, actually. This has been amazing. We have 8 or 10 questions that we want to ask.
We've done 2 or 3.
And we've done 2 or 3, and I've written down an additional 6 or 7, so we might have to do a part 2 of this. Unfortunately, Toby, we're out of time today.
Okay.
It's been amazing. It genuinely has been really good, really interesting. A very different type of HR discussion than some of the other CPO discussions that we've had. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for having me, and I'm up for part 2, or I'll let the twin come. The
digital twin can come. We'll all just give each other the digital twin. We'll all have our own digital twins and go from there. Debbie, thank you very much for co-hosting.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the People Agenda. Thank you.